9. A deadly lesson. Victoria Therese Isabel Ljungman moved from Sweden to the United States for college. She was lucky enough to attend on a tennis scholarship. After graduating, Victoria stayed in America and pursued her dream of becoming a pilot, and by 23 years old, she was a flight instructor. But the ambitious young aviator's future was cut short in 2022 when she died in a plane crash. Ljungman was doing a lesson with 18-year-old Oluwagbahunmi Ayominde Ayobode and another student in Newport News, Virginia, when the single-engine Cessna that they were flying crashed to the ground from 100 feet high in the air. After getting a panicked response about a crash and no further response, Air Traffic Control sent a rescue team to the site. They found the plane in the woods right next to the airport. Authorities believe Ayobode pulled the small aircraft up at too steep of an angle during takeoff, causing the engine to stall in mid-air. He and the other students survived the crash and were airlifted to a hospital with a few life-threatening injuries, while Victoria wasn't as lucky. 8. A bizarre theft. In 2020, Todd Hansen was working at Jefferson County International Airport in Port Townsend, Washington, when a man later identified as 59-year-old Richard Jordal approached him. Jordal asked to be flown to Astoria, Oregon. It was immediately clear to Hansen that Jordal was in a fairly questionable mental state, as he explained how he needed to retrieve some diving equipment from a nearby airport and free his boat from a sandbar it got stuck in. Hansen later told the Aero News Network that he had to keep repeating himself to Jordal, who was incoherent but didn't seem intoxicated or under the influence of anything. Jordal persisted with his flight request and asked Hansen if they could fly at a low altitude to avoid getting picked up by radar detection. He then tried to rent an airplane but was denied when he couldn't show a pilot's license. But Jordal wasn't taking no as an answer. He later returned to the property and stole a plane. After making a brief stop in Bremerton, Washington, he took off again and headed south to Oregon. In the meantime, Hansen told police about the strange conversation he'd had with the man. Residents of the Quileute Indian Reservation in western Washington heard a loud crash about 2 hours later, and search parties worked through the night to find the wreck. When they discovered the plane the next morning, Jordal was unconscious, but miraculously still alive. He was rushed to the hospital where his condition somewhat improved, but he soon died from his injuries. While the cause of the crash was unclear, it's believed that the aircraft ran out of fuel. The thoughts going through Jordal's mind and what compelled him to steal the plane are also a total mystery. His obituary revealed that he struggled with mental illness in the late stages of life and had many pending criminal cases for other unusual incidents at the time he passed. 7. A life-saving ping. After taking off from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania in 2021, a single-engine Cessna 150 vanished after a rapid descent into a forest with the 58-year-old pilot and his 13-year-old daughter. The pair survived the crash, but were stranded and injured in the middle of the wilderness with no help in sight. Temperatures plummeted to near freezing as night fell, and the survivors weren't properly prepared for the cold. In the meantime, rescuers pinpointed the wreck's location and identified the pilot, which allowed them to contact his wife, who was waiting for her family's arrival in the Poconos. She gave the team her husband's phone number, which let them ping its last known location. They were also able to track the teenager's iPad, which helped them narrow down the duo's whereabouts even faster. By the time help arrived, they were both in a pre-hypothermic state and were huddling together to stay warm. They were taken to the hospital for injuries and were expected to fully recover. But if more time had passed out in the cold, it's very likely the two would have died. 6. Triple tragedy. Hermantown, Minnesota homeowners Jason and Crystal Hoffman narrowly avoided death when a single-engine Cessna 172 crashed into the top floor of their home back in October 2022. They missed the aircraft's path by just a few feet and miraculously walked away with no injuries. The outcome was less fortunate for the 3 people on the plane, who all lost their lives. They were identified as 32-year-old Alyssa Schmidt, her brother 31-year-old Matthew Schmidt, and 32-year-old Tyler Fredland, who piloted the craft. Jason Hoffman was still in shock when he spoke with the Duluth News-Tribune the next morning. He said he remembered waking up to a loud explosion and his wife screaming. At first, he thought their furnace had exploded. It wasn't until he got a flashlight and saw the wreck next to the couple's bed that he realized a plane had hit his home. Neighbors warned the Hoffmans to stay inside because the house was now surrounded by downed power lines, but they were too overwhelmed by the dust and had no choice but to go outdoors. Thankfully, they avoided contact with any live wires. Hoffman described the loss of life as heartbreaking, but said he and Crystal were grateful to be alive. Their cat, who was in the basement at the time of the crash, was also unhurt. Shocking video footage of the accident's aftermath showed where the Cessna gouged a hole in the roof and sent debris tumbling to the ground. Air traffic control officials said they believed the plane dropped off their radar as it traveled away from Duluth International Airport shortly before the crash. According to the last update, officials from the Federal Aviation Administration and the National Transportation Safety Board were investigating the accident and had not yet determined the crash's cause. 5. Beechcraft sparks 3-alarm blaze. All 8 residents of an apartment building in Keene, New Hampshire were at home when a single-engine Beechcraft Sierra slammed into their garage one night in 2022. The plane had just taken off from nearby Keene Dillon Hopkins Airport when the crash happened. Thankfully, all the residents escaped uninjured, despite the collision causing extensive damage to the building and sparking a fire. Emergency responders from all over the county came to the scene, where they battled the blaze until it was finally extinguished 2 hours after the crash. The residents were all temporarily relocated with help from Red Cross volunteers. Both people on the Beechcraft died in the crash. Records showed that the plane was owned by a company called Monadnock Aviation, and there were no indications of mechanical problems, according to Airport Director David Hickling, who spoke with ABC News. He explained that the aircraft wasn't equipped with a recording device that could accurately tell investigators what led up to the crash, and that its occupants never even sent out an emergency call. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSTB, is leading an ongoing investigation to determine the cause of this tragedy. 4. Airborne mental health crisis. During the early morning of September 3, 2022, an unlicensed student pilot took off in a Beechcraft King Air C-90 from Tupelo Regional Airport in Mississippi. He then called 911 and threatened to crash the plane into a local Walmart while erratically flying over the city. Authorities evacuated the store and surrounding area while trying to negotiate with the deranged man, who was later identified as Corey Patterson, an employee of a local aviation company. They eventually talked him out of crashing the plane, but he didn't know how to land, so a pilot had to guide him through the process. Patterson was approaching the runway when he suddenly veered away. As the aircraft ran out of fuel, he posted a goodbye note to his Facebook. By then, he'd been in the air for over 4 hours. 45 minutes later, authorities lost contact, but Patterson got back in touch to let them know he landed the plane in a field. The aircraft was damaged, but he came out unscathed. Flight tracking data revealed that Patterson veered in circles and took sharp turns while flying somewhere between 900 and 2,000 feet above sea level. Tupelo Police Chief John Quaker told the New York Times that the rogue aviator's motive was unknown. Patterson was quickly arrested on federal and state charges, including grand larceny and making terrorist threats. He died in custody 2 months later. While authorities declined to elaborate on the cause of his death, Patterson's attorney, Tony Ferrazzi, revealed that he took his own life. 3. A fatal malfunction. A de Havilland turboprop seaplane was a half-hour into its flight from San Juan Island to Renton, Washington in 2022 when it crashed into the Puget Sound with 10 people on board. The U.S. Coast Guard suspended its search for survivors after looking over a 2,800 square mile area. 6 bodies were found, and the rest of the victims were presumed dead. Investigators with the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, finally found the wreck over a week after the accident. It took the use of 3 types of sonar before they detected pieces of the plane sitting 150 feet below the water near Whidbey Bay. Over the next few days, crews worked to recover what they could with remotely operated vehicles and cranes. They got enough of the downed aircraft to uncover a key clue into why it may have malfunctioned. The plane's actuator, the only part that holds its horizontal tail or stabilizer in place, was broken somehow. Without the actuator, there's no way to control the stabilizer, which began to spin uncontrollably mid-flight and caused the pilots to lose control of the aircraft. Experts believe the upper and lower portions of the actuator separated due to a loose clamp that wasn't properly fixed in place. The clamp nut had damaged holes, which most likely prevented it from being secured correctly. There also seemed to be a missing lock ring, and it's unclear why. To prevent a similar tragedy from happening in the future, the NTSB and the Canadian Transportation Safety Board asked Deviation to draft instructions for all operators of that particular aircraft to ensure these pieces are in place and properly engaged before takeoff. This unfortunate incident serves as a chilling reminder that while flying is statistically the safest form of travel, one small malfunction can prove deadly. 2. Rogue airport employee goes for Joyride. Richard B. Russell worked as a ground service agent at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, and while he didn't know how to actually fly a plane, he had access to aircraft and didn't let his lack of knowledge stop him from taking a passenger turboprop for a spin in 2018. All other flight activity in and around the airport came to a halt, while thousands of customers watched the plane dive and roll in the sky. For the next hour, air traffic controllers tried to guide Russell to safety, while military jets flew nearby prepared to take action if necessary. Russell's tone fluctuated between calm, erratic, and depressed. He gushed about the scenic views of the mountains, apologized for interrupting everyone's day, complained about feeling dizzy, and asked about the potential legal consequences he would face when he landed. In his own words, Russell described himself as a broken guy with a few screws loose, adding that he never really knew it until now. The flight ended tragically when the plane crashed 30 miles from the airport. Timor, a co-worker and lifelong acquaintance of Russell, told the New York Times that Russell had recently been complaining that the airport wasn't paying $15 per hour like many others do. But nobody imagined that he would steal a plane and fly it to his death over this, intentionally or otherwise. Russell was known for being a good-natured, religious man, and he passed all the required security clearances for his job. The incident raised worrying questions about possible security issues at airports, especially in the post-9/11 age. In a statement, the FBI reassured the public that it was thoroughly investigating the matter in an effort to determine what went wrong in Russell's mind. 1. Deadly deviation. After taking off from Jerez, Spain for Colonia, Germany one afternoon in 2022, a Cessna 551 reported cabin pressure problems to air traffic control. Shortly after that, the plane fell out of contact and deviated from its route while flying erratically through German, Danish, and Swedish airspace. All three countries dispatched military aircraft to investigate the plane. The pilot was identified as 72-year-old German businessman Peter Griezmann. He was flying with his wife Julianne, his daughter Lisa, and a close friend. Things took an even stranger turn when Swedish pilots caught up with the Cessna and reported that they couldn't see anyone in the cockpit. The jet seemed to be flying on autopilot, but it eventually ran out of fuel and plunged into the Baltic Sea. While the body parts weren't identifiable, officials concluded that all 4 people on the plane died. The aircraft didn't have a black box, and not enough of it has been found to give any meaningful clues as to what happened or why. Experts believe that the pilot and passengers may have fallen unconscious due to rapid cabin depressurization, which can happen quickly and causes oxygen levels to plunge dangerously low. But this is just one theory. Investigators are still trying to get to the bottom of the mysterious tragedy. Thanks for watching. Would you rather fly in a rickety old single-engine plane with a new pilot with no experience, or be stuck on a cruise ship during a hurricane? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.